Tom Clark laid under the stone, destined forever to be walked on. Railroad Bill, a ghost on the tracks, a man and a myth with the wind at his back. Alabama scoundrels, wild and free, outlaws roaming from the hills to the sea. Pirates, bandits, and bushwhackers too. History's shadows come into view. Bloody Bob Sims with his prophets war, preaching fire through the devil's door. And Steve Renfro with the sheriff's star. Outlaw justice never strayed far.
I'm here with Country Diggers. Welcome to the Speakeasy. Today we're going to go into Outlaw James Copeland and the infamous Harvey battle. And I'll be reading out of Alabama Scoundrels, Outlaws, Pirates, Bandits, and Bushwhackers by Kelly Kazek and Will Elrick. And it's a continuation of last video, which was about Gale H, who started the Outlaw Gang, and James Copeland then took it over after Gale H was killed. So stay tuned. All right, James Copeland and the infamous Harvey battle. In July 1848, James Copeland, by then one of the most infamous outlaws in Mississippi and Alabama, avenged the death of his friend and mentor, Gale H, by shooting to death H's murderer, James A. Harvey, in Mississippi. The men in the group, Copeland and his brothers, John and Thomas, as well as Jackson Poole and Sam Sultan, traveled from Mobile and then stopped to camp for the night near Harvey's property and made a fire to roast some corn. The smoke alerted Harvey and his men to the gang's presence, and at dawn, Harvey's men surprised the gang at the campsite. In the ensuing gun battle, Poole and Harvey were shot and killed. In Copeland's biography, Life and Confessions of the noted outlaw James Copeland, recorded by Sheriff James Robert Soda Pitts, Copeland described his feelings while on the run. I then formed a stern resolution within my own breast that if God would permit me ever again to reach my home, that I would refrain from all my evil ways and become a Christian, believing that God had been merciful to me in preserving me and hurling my comrades and associates into another world. That spring, Copeland was arrested and indicted in Alabama for larceny and in Mississippi for Harvey's murder. While in prison, he told his life story to Pitts, giving a detailed account of his youth and his exploits with the notorious outlaws Pitts referred to as the Copeland and Wages gang of land pirates. James Copeland was born to Isham and Rebecca Wells Copeland near the Pascagoula River in Jackson County, Mississippi. On January 18, 1823, Isham was a fairly well-to-do farmer with slaves and plenty of livestock. Isham was determined that his children get an education and sent James to school along with his siblings. Instead, young James learned to steal small items such as pocket knives and money from friends. He was also known to take revenge on classmates who made him angry by lying to the teacher about manufactured wrongdoing. that would lead to the students flogging, whipping, I guess. He was known as a troublemaker from an early age, yet his mother could see nothing but an angelic son. When James got into trouble, Rebecca would protect him to make excuses for his wicked ways. Copeland told Pitts that his mother has been the principal and great cause of all my crimes and misfortunes by stimulating me to the commission of those deeds that have brought me to what I am. In one such case, James was sent to get some greens from a neighbor, Mrs. Helverson, and borrowed a knife to cut them. Mrs. Helverson had asked James to be careful with the expensive knife and be sure to return it. Instead, he said he lost it and sneaked it away with it hidden at the bottom of the bag beneath the greens. When the knife was discovered in his possession, he claimed he had bought it in Mobile and proved it by my mother, who always upheld me in my rascality. James was making no friends in his hometown. But the turning point from troublemaker to criminal came when James was 14 years old. One night he stole some of Mr. Halverson's pigs and sold them in Mobile for $2 per head. The scheme was so simple that James got greedy and made a second attempt to steal Halverson's livestock. This time, young James was caught and turned over to the law. Charged with larceny, he faced considerable jail time. However, his mother once again came to his aid, sending a message to the well-known outlaw Gale H in Mobile, asking if he could help her son. Asking an outlaw to... Oh. Wages traveled to the Copeland home in Mississippi to make plans to keep James from prison. James was taken with the older outlaw, who was at that time 21 years old, and the course of his life was sealed. Eventually, some of Copeland's brothers joined him, and the clan became known primarily as the Copeland Gang. James later described Wages. Although a villain, as I must now acknowledge, Wages was, yet he had some redeeming traits in his character. At his own home, he was friendly and kind and hospitable. In company, he was affable and polite, and no person at first glance would have believed for one moment that he was the outlawed brigand. I firmly believe he would have spilt the last drop of blood in his veins to protect me. Yet I must say that he was the principal author of my misfortunes and has brought me where I am. All through this, he's blaming everybody but himself, okay? His mother was wrong. His mother should have, the first time he got in trouble, his mother should have put a stop to it. But he blames everybody but himself in this. After Wages and James burned down the courthouse at Americus, destroying arrest records and eventually wiping James's slate clean, the teenager joined Wages' gang in Mobile. The clan, which had varying numbers and eventually topped out at 60 members, held meetings in a wigwam. Wages, as president, issued an oath to incoming members if the rest of the gang approved them. Young James took the oath with his hand on a Bible. You solemnly swear upon the holy evangelist of Almighty God that you will never divulge and always conceal and never reveal any of the signs or passwords of our order, that you may not invent any sign, token, or device by which the secret mysteries of our order may be known, that you will not in any way betray or cause to betray any member of this order, the whole under pain of having your the whole under pain of having your head severed from your body, so help you God. Then young Copeland was required to memorize a variety of signs and passwords, as well as a special alphabet invented by the Moral Gang of Tennessee that was used to send messages. Sheriff Pitts, who later became Copeland's biographer, said the period was a perfect time for the gang to commit daring robberies and wholesale murders. Here is the picture of the mystic alphabet used by the Copeland Wages Gang in their secret correspondence and documents. Right there. That's the picture of it. All right. As it was a time when people carried their money on them and traveled in easily accessible carriages and stagecoaches. Gang members plundered and rioted at will, including one night when they burned much of Mobile's business district, with gang members wearing false mustaches and false whiskers, and many dressed like sailors ready for action with false keys, lockpicks, and crowbars. Each man had a revolver and a bowie knife. The gang's haul that night was estimated at a total of $25,000, including $5,000 in jewelry and $3,000 in clothing, as well as groceries and liquors. Then the pillagers set fire to each store and loaded 2 large boats they had taken to Dog River. At times, the gang would travel to other towns, and Wages' second in command, Charles Preacher McGrath, would pose as a pastor, being an Irishman and his tongue tipped with plenty of blaring. He would host a rowdy revival, luring unsuspecting townspeople away from their homes and businesses. Other gang members were then free to loot at will. But Copeland had his doubts about McGrath, who he described as wanting instability, that he was too wild and uncertain in his actions. Copeland, though, was equally brutal, telling Pitts, "I believed in never leaving any living witnesses behind to tell what I had done, if there was any way to prevent it." Nothing was off limits for gang members, who simply took what they wanted, including people. They would often steal slaves and sell them. Copeland recalled a time when he took a mulatto slave from a home he had robbed, promising the girl he would marry her and free her. He lived with her for a while before selling her for $1,000. He later told Pitts, "I must have acknowledged that my conscience did that time feel mortified, after the girl had come with me and I had lived with her as a wife, and she had such implicit confidence in me. My conscience still feels mortified when I reflect how much better it would have been for me to have kept her and lived with her than to come to what I have." Despite his later twinge of conscience, Copeland helped Wages and McGrath amass a fortune of more than $30,000. I then proposed to Wages and McGrath to make the amount in gold, $30,000 even, and bury it in some safe place secure so that we might have it for any emergency, and in case of the death of one of us, the other two were to share it, and if two died, one had it all. The men put $10,000 each in 3 strong kegs. Listen to this, treasure hunters. And buried them in a swamp on Hamilton Creek near Mobile. Now, here's where they move it. But the gang was changing. In 1843, Gale Wages began courting the daughter of gang member Allen Brown, a man who would soon become a burden to Wages, and married her in December 1845. During the intervening months, 2 big events occurred in the gang, which had grown to an unwieldy and nearly unmanageable number. Wages killed 7 members accused as spies and traitors, and he entered the business of printing counterfeit money, sometimes after the gang members were killed. Wages, Copeland, and McGrath moved the kegs of gold to Catahoula Swamp in Hancock County, Mississippi. All right, there you go. Now, I don't know if that's still a swamp. It probably is still a swamp since it says Catahoula Swamp. I don't know. And I don't know if that gold has ever been found. But I guess you could go look for it if you wanted to. I'm probably not ever going to. I just can't travel. I can't drive. I can't drive to go to treasure places. But anyway, the counterfeiting operation made Copeland nervous. It was Wages' father-in-law, Allen Brown, who lured him into printing money. Copeland felt Brown was a burden to Wages, who spent much of his money feeding and clothing Brown and his gang. Eventually, Wages' association with Brown and his scam of James Harvey would be his downfall and the death knell for the gang. That same pitiful note and Brown's rascality and falsehood cost Wages and McGrath their lives, and Harvey and Poole their lives, and have placed me where I am. See, he's blaming everybody but himself. Copeland later told Sheriff J.R.S. Pitts while dictating his memoir, Brown was nearly broke, and so his son-in-law bought Harvey's note from him and loaned him $60 as well. Brown told Wages to get the money Harvey owed or to kill him. Instead, Harvey shot and killed Wages and McGrath. This news sounded in my ears like thunder, and so astonished was I that I lost for a time all my senses. Almost instantly, it seemed that every crime that I had ever committed in my life was then pictured before my eyes, and the awful consequences attended them. Copeland said. Grief-stricken, Gale's parents, Jacob and Susanna Wages, sought vengeance, telling Copeland, James, we will give you $1,000 for Harvey's scalp if you will kill that rascal or have it done. So Copeland set out on July 8th, 1848, with his brothers and Poole and Sultan for Harvey's home in Mississippi. Harvey was killed in the ensuing gun battle, but Copeland was forced into hiding and didn't like living on the lam. He was arrested in the spring of 1849 and served 4 years in prison in Wetumpka, Alabama, after pleading guilty on the Alabama charges to avoid going to trial in Mississippi. But Pitts, the 21-year-old sheriff, of Perry County, Mississippi, where the shootout occurred, transferred Copeland to jail there. 2 years later, Copeland went to trial for Harvey's murder and was convicted. Copeland remained in jail during an appeal, but by 1857 his time had run out. The death warrant said Copeland was sentenced to be hanged by the neck until he be dead on the 30th day of October in the year of our Lord 1857, between the hours of 10 o'clock a.m. and 4 o'clock p.m. at the place appointed by law. Before his death, Copeland wrote a self-pitying letter to his mother, dated October 29, 1857, from Augusta, Mississippi. Mrs. Rebecca Copeland, my dear mother, it is with painful feelings indeed that I attempt writing to you on the present occasion. I take this opportunity knowing at the same time that it is the last one of the kind which I shall ever be permitted to enjoy while here on earth. It is long and much that I have suffered while in prison since my first confinement in Mobile County, and yet it seems as though nothing will pay the debt but my life. I have had my trial and was convicted upon a charge of murder, and I have received the awful sentence of death. The sheriff told me today that tomorrow at 2 o'clock I will be hanged, according to the order of the court. Oh, my dear mother, what an awful sound is this to reach your ears. Oh, would it be otherwise, but you are aware that I justly merit the sentence. You are knowing to my being a bad man. And, dear mother, had you given me the proper advice when young, I would not perhaps be doing well. It is often I have meditated on this subject since my confinement in prison, and often have I recollected my good old father's advice when I was young, and repented 1,000 times over with sorrow and regret that I have failed to receive it as good, benevolent advice. If such a course I had taken, I have no doubt but I would be doing well at this time. But it is too late now to talk of things past and gone. This time has come when I shall have to take my departure from this world, and it pains my heart to know that I have to leave you and my brothers and sisters. And much am I mortified to think how distantly you have treated me while here in prison. Well, since he's in prison, she abandoned him. Why didn't she get another outlaw to break him out of prison? Not the first time have you been to see me. Not the first time have you been to see me. But I can freely excuse you for all this, and I do hope you will prepare to meet Jesus in heaven. Dear Mother, long has the time been that life was not any satisfaction to me. I am now in the dungeon with the cold and icy hands clasped around me and cold as clay. Much have I suffered, but after 2 o'clock tomorrow, my trouble will all be over, or worse than they are at present. This I am not able to tell. I have been preparing to meet my God, praying diligently for mercy and for the pardon of my sins, but I do not know whether my prayers have been heard or not. The scriptures say that the Spirit of the Lord shall not always strive with man, and I say again, he that calls upon the Lord in the last hours shall be saved. If so, I feel some spark of hope but I tell you this hope is hanging upon a slender thread. Dear Mother, it makes the tears trickle down my cold cheeks to have to pen this statement to you. Dear Mother, I have to close this letter. My heart is overflowed already. So when you receive this, you can keep it as a memorial and remember that poor Jim is no more on earth, that he has bid you a long farewell. Dear Mother, it appears as though my heart will break at the very thought of this. Oh, could I but see you once more before my death. It would give my aching heart some relief. But we have to part without this pleasure. Now, my good old mother, I bid you a long farewell forever and ever. James Copeland. A wooden gallows was erected outside the jail. Pitts, who had spent the intervening years recording Copeland's memories, was to act as executioner. The day was beautiful, typical of a fall day in the deep South. Pitts wrote, the sky was blue and serene, all nature was calm and peaceful. The sheriff estimated 10,000 spectators attended. Copeland addressed the crowd. He especially urged the young men present to take warning from his career and fate and to avoid bad company. That's good advice right there. I have to admit, that's good advice he gave. With his hands tied and a hood pulled over his head, Copeland uttered, "Lord, have mercy on me." Copeland was praying when the trapdoor fell and his neck was broken. No one came to claim Copeland's body. His mother, who claimed to love him and get him out of all kinds of trouble, deserted him in his real time of need. Okay. That's a pitiful mother, I tell you. That is just a pitiful mother. She didn't even correct him when he did wrong all through his life. Never corrected at all. He might have turned out differently if she had. But Copeland was praying when the trapdoor fell and his neck was broken. No one came to claim Copeland's body, so he was buried in a steep bank. But his body disappeared after a few days, Pitts wrote. A legend arose that a skeleton on display in a drugstore in Hattiesburg was Copeland's remains, strung with wire. The gruesome artifact finally disappeared and has never been seen again, Pitt wrote. J.R.S. Pitts published his account of Copeland's memories of the gang, A Perfect Reign of Terror, in the 1858 book, Life and Confessions of the Noted Outlaw James Copeland, executed at Augusta, Perry County, Mississippi, leader of the notorious Copeland and Wages clan, which terrorized the entire southern states. Related by himself in prison after he was condemned to death, giving a list of all members of the clan. In a sketch of the author, in the front of an edition of the book released in 1909, Pitts was described as courageous for acting as Copeland's jailer when at any moment members of the brutal gang might attempt to free him. Few sheriffs ever served through such trying times, for during the entire time after Copeland became a prisoner under him there was not an hour that his life was not in danger, and not a day that there was not a risk to be taken in the discharge of some duty which only a brave, courageous, conscientious officer would have dared to perform. The introduction says the sale of the book was progressing wonderfully until Pitts was sued in Mobile for libel because of the people named in the book. However, Pitts had signed certificates from witnesses saying they heard Copeland give Pitts permission to reveal his story, including this one from T.C. Carter of Mobile, who wrote, "This is to certify that I was present at the execution of James Copeland, who was executed in Augusta, Perry County, Mississippi, the 30th day of October, 1857, and heard the Sheriff J.R.S. Pitts ask him, the said James Copeland, if the detailed history and list of names given as members of the Wages and Copeland clan were correct, and he answered the sheriff in the affirmative that they were. Pitts eventually won his case, and in the re-release of the book, gave an account of the trial justifying publication of the book. With the gang disbanded, Pitts hung up his sheriff's badge, went to medical college, and became a physician, and later served as a Mississippi legislator, postmaster, and county superintendent. He died on December 22nd, 1920, at the age of 88. All right, hope y'all enjoyed. That was pretty good, and maybe somebody will find that gold one day. All right, y'all.